The text message came at 6:47 p.m. on a Friday. Come Sunday or I burn your stuff. Not joking. Kendra, my ex-wife. The woman who had taken my house, my savings, and most of my time with my children in a divorce that still felt like an open wound 18 months later. I stared at that message for a long time. She had been making my life difficult since the day I moved out, restricting my visitation, forgetting to tell me about school events, poisoning the kids against me one whispered comment at a time, but threatening to burn my belongings. That was new. I should have waited until Sunday like she demanded, should have played by her rules, showed up at the appointed time, collected my boxes under her watchful, contemptuous gaze. Instead, I went Saturday night. Not to spite her, not to start a fight, because something had been wrong for months. Something I couldn't name, couldn't prove, couldn't explain to the lawyers or the family court judge or anyone else who might have listened. My son had stopped talking to me. Not the normal preteen withdrawal. Caleb was only 10, but something deeper, darker. He flinched when I hugged him, avoided eye contact, gave one-word answers to every question. And my daughter. My daughter was dead. Sophie had died 10 months ago. 6 years old, the light of my life. Gone. She fell down the stairs, Kendra had told the police. I heard her scream. By the time I got there, she wasn't breathing. Accidental death. That's what the medical examiner ruled. A tragic accident. The kind that happens to families every day. I didn't believe it. I had never believed it. But I had no proof. Nothing except the gnawing certainty in my gut that something was terribly, horribly wrong in that house. So when Kendra's threatening text arrived, I didn't wait for Sunday. I went Saturday night. And I found out what had really happened to my daughter. The house was lit up when I arrived, my old house, the one I had put a down payment on in 2015, the one where Caleb had taken his first steps, the one where Sophie had learned to ride a bicycle in the driveway, the one that wasn't mine anymore. Kendra's car was in the driveway. Next to it, a black pickup truck I recognized, Ray Dunlap's, her boyfriend. The man she had started dating 2 months after our separation, the man she swore she hadn't been seeing while we were still married. I didn't care about Ray, didn't care about Kendra's love life or her lies or her petty cruelties. I just wanted my stuff. I parked on the street, walked up the driveway, could hear music coming from inside, laughter, the clink of glasses. Having a party while my belongings sat in boxes, waiting to be burned. I was about to knock on the front door when I heard it. A sound that stopped me cold. A child crying, not from inside the house, from below it, the basement. I moved to the side of the house to the small window that looked into the basement. It was covered with a dark curtain, but there was a gap, just a sliver, where the fabric didn't quite reach the frame. I pressed my face to the glass. What I saw destroyed me. My son. Caleb, 10 years old, sitting on the concrete floor, his right wrist handcuffed to a copper pipe that ran along the wall. He was crying, quietly, the way children cry when they've learned that loud crying only makes things worse. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was seeing. My son was handcuffed in a basement like an animal. I didn't knock on the door, didn't confront Kendra, didn't do any of the rational things a rational person might do. I ran to the back of the house, to the basement entrance I had installed myself 6 years ago. The lock was flimsy, I had always meant to replace it, and 3 hard kicks sent the door crashing inward. "Caleb!" He looked up. His face was streaked with tears, pale in the dim light of a single bare bulb. "Dad! Dad!" I was down the stairs, in seconds, kneeling beside him, examining the handcuff on his wrist. Standard, police-style cuffs, the kind you could buy at any security supply store. "I'm getting you out of here. Hold still." I pulled out my pocket knife. The cuffs were attached to the pipe with a length of chain. I couldn't cut the cuffs, but I could work on the chain. "Dad, you have to hurry. They'll hear you. They'll come down." Let them come. The chain was tougher than I expected. I sawed at it frantically, the knife slipping, biting into my palm. Dad, please, please, hurry. I'm trying, buddy, I'm trying. The chain gave way, the cuffs were still on his wrist, but he was free from the pipe. Can you walk? Are you hurt? I'm okay, I'm okay. He was shaking violently, his whole body trembling. We have to go now. I pulled him to his feet, started toward the stairs. Then I saw it. A second pipe. 3 feet away from where Caleb had been chained, with smaller cuffs attached. Child-sized cuffs. Too small for Caleb's wrists, just the right size for a 6-year-old. I stopped, stared at those cuffs, at the scratches on the pipe where small fingers had struggled against metal, at the dark stains on the concrete beneath. Dad. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. Don't look up. I looked up. The ceiling of that basement was unfinished, exposed wooden beams, pipes, ductwork. The kind of ceiling you see in 1,000 suburban basements across America. But this ceiling was different, because someone had written on it. Scratched into the wooden beam directly above the smaller cuffs were words. Small, uneven letters carved with something sharp. A nail, maybe, or a piece of broken glass. Sophie was here. And below that, tally marks. Dozens of them. Grouped in sets of 5, the way prisoners mark days on cell walls. 47 marks. 47 days. My daughter had been kept in this basement for 47 days. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world had narrowed to those words, those marks, that terrible truth scratched into wood above the place where my baby girl had been chained. Dad, Caleb was pulling at my arm. Dad, we have to go. I looked at him, at my son, at the terror in his eyes. Caleb, what happened to Sophie? What really happened? He started crying again, not the quiet tears from before, deep, racking sobs that shook his whole body. She didn't fall down the stairs. She didn't fall. They did it. They did it to her like they do it to me. But she was smaller. She couldn't take it. And one night she stopped crying and she wouldn't wake up and they took her upstairs and they said she fell and, who did this? The voice that came out of me wasn't human. It was something primal, something broken, something that had just learned its child had been murdered and the killer was upstairs drinking wine. Mom. And Ray. They do it when we're bad. They call it discipline. Sophie was bad a lot. She cried. Too much. She wanted you. She kept asking for you. My daughter had died calling for me, and I hadn't been there. I had been in a studio apartment 12 miles away, fighting with lawyers over visitation schedules, while my little girl was being tortured in a basement. Graham? Kendra's voice, from upstairs, from the door at the top of the basement steps. Graham, is that you? What the hell are you doing here? You're not supposed to... She appeared at the top of the stairs. 39 years old. Still beautiful in that cold, polished way she had always been beautiful. Behind her, Ray Dunlap's bulk filled the doorway. She saw me. Saw Caleb pressed against my side, the broken chain dangling from his wrist. Her face changed. Graham, let me explain. Explain? The word came out as a snarl. Explain? You murdered my daughter. You've been torturing my son. What is there to explain? It's not what it looks like. Caleb is a troubled child. He needs discipline. Strong. Discipline. And Sophie was an accident. She was always clumsy. You know that. I looked at the ceiling, at the words carved into wood. Sophie was here. She wrote her name, while you had her chained down here. She carved it into the ceiling so someone would know, so someone would find it. Kendra's composure cracked, just for a second. Then the mask slid back into place. Graham, you're not thinking clearly. You're trespassing. You're interfering with my custody. If you take Caleb out of this house, I'll call the police. Good. Call them. Call them right now. Let them see this basement. Let them see what you did. Ray stepped forward. Maybe you should leave, Graham, before this gets ugly. He was bigger than me. 44 years old, construction foreman, the kind of man who solved problems with his fists. I didn't care. You touch me, and I'll kill you. I'll kill both of you, right here, right now. I meant it. In that moment, I absolutely meant it. Something in my voice must have convinced them because Ray stopped. Kendra put a hand on his arm. "Let him go. Let him take the boy. We'll deal with this through lawyers, like civilized people." "Lawyers?" I laughed. It was an ugly sound. "I'm not calling lawyers, I'm calling police. And when they see this basement, when they see what you did to Sophie, you're going to prison for the rest of your miserable life." I grabbed Caleb, headed for the basement door, the one I had kicked in. Kendra called after me. "No one will believe you. He's a troubled child. He makes things up. I have documentation, therapists, school counselors. Everyone knows he has behavioral problems." I didn't respond, just kept walking, out the door, across the yard to my truck. I put Caleb in the passenger seat, got behind the wheel, drove 3 blocks, then I pulled over and called 911. The police arrived at 1247 Maple Lane at 10:23 p.m. I was sitting in my truck around the corner, holding my son, when I heard the sirens. Detective Marcus Hargrove was the lead investigator. 50 years old, homicide division, with the kind of weary eyes that had seen humanity at its worst. He found me an hour later still in my truck, Caleb asleep against my shoulder. "Mr. Mercer? I'm Detective Hargrove. I need to ask you some questions. Did you see the basement?" "We saw it. And the ceiling? The writing?" "We saw that, too." He paused. "Mr. Mercer, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. My daughter, Sophie, she died 10 months ago. They said she fell down the stairs. I pulled the file on the way here. Accidental death. It wasn't an accident. She was murdered in that basement, and they covered it up." Detective Hargrove was quiet for a moment. "Based on what we found tonight, I'm inclined to agree with you. We've arrested your ex-wife and her boyfriend. They're being processed now, and I've already requested that your daughter's case be reopened. What happens now? Now we build a case. We document the basement. We interview your son, with appropriate support, of course, and only when he's ready. We exhume your daughter's body and have a forensic pathologist take another look at her injuries." "And Caleb? Where does he go?" "He goes with you. Emergency custody. Given what we found, no judge in the state would send him back to his mother." I looked at my son. At the bruises on his arm I was only now noticing, at the way he curled into me, seeking safety, seeking the protection I should have given him all along. "I didn't know," I said. "I swear to God I didn't know. If I had known—" "Mr. Mercer," Detective Hargrove's voice was surprisingly gentle. "The people who did this were very careful. They fooled doctors, teachers, social workers. They fooled a medical examiner. You're not responsible for their deception. I'm his father. I should have known. You're here now. That's what matters. You came when it mattered most." I wasn't sure I believed him. I'm still not sure. But I held my son a little tighter and promised myself that I would never let anyone hurt him again. Let me tell you about my life before that night. My name is Graham Mercer. I was born in 1982 in Tyler, Texas. Working-class family, working-class values. My father was a plumber. I became an HVAC technician. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Good money, steady work. The kind of job that lets you support a family. I met Kendra Vance in 2009 at a mutual friend's birthday party. She was 24, just finished dental hygienist school, ambitious in a way I found attractive. She knew what she wanted and went after it. I fell hard. We all do, when we're young and stupid and can't tell the difference between ambition and ruthlessness. We married in 2011. I was 29, she was 26. Nice ceremony at her parents' country club. I should have seen the warning signs then, the way she controlled every detail, the way she dismissed my opinions, the way her family looked at me like I wasn't quite good enough. I didn't see anything. I was in love. Caleb came along in 2014. I was 32 years old, holding my son for the first time, and I thought my life was complete. I had a beautiful wife, a healthy baby, a good job. What more could anyone want? Sophie arrived in 2017. My little girl, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, a head full of dark hair, and the brightest smile I had ever seen. For a few years, things were good. Not perfect. Kendra and I had our problems, but good. I worked, she worked, the kids grew. Normal life, normal family. Then, around 2022, something changed. Kendra became distant, critical. Everything I did was wrong. The way I loaded the dishwasher, the way I disciplined the kids, the way I breathed. She started working late, coming home smelling of unfamiliar cologne, checking her phone obsessively. I confronted her. She denied everything. Said I was paranoid, controlling, insecure. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. It doesn't matter now. In January 2023, she asked for a divorce. Said she had been unhappy for years. Said she wanted someone who matched her ambitions. Said I could see the kids every other weekend if I didn't fight her on the house. I should have fought. Should have demanded joint custody, insisted on more time, hired a better lawyer. I didn't. I was broken, exhausted, convinced that fighting would only hurt the kids more. I signed the papers, moved into a studio apartment, tried to make the best of every other weekend with my children. And then Sophie died, December 14th, 2023. I got the call at 7:32 a.m. I was at work installing a new furnace in a house across town. Mr. Mercer, this is Dr. Patterson at Mercy General. I'm calling about your daughter, Sophie. The world went gray. There's been an accident. She fell down the stairs at home. I'm so sorry, Mr. Mercer. We did everything we could. I don't remember driving to the hospital. Don't remember parking. Don't remember walking through the doors. I remember seeing her. My baby girl, 6 years old, lying on a hospital bed looking like she was sleeping. But she wasn't sleeping. She was gone. Kendra was there, crying, surrounded by her parents and Ray Dunlap, who I had met exactly twice and who was holding my ex-wife's hand like he belonged there. She fell, Kendra said when she saw me. I was in the kitchen. I heard her scream. By the time I got there, she dissolved into tears. I wanted to comfort her. She was Sophie's mother. Whatever had happened between us, we shared this grief. But something stopped me. Caleb was sitting in a corner of the waiting room, 9 years old, not crying, not reacting at all, just staring at the wall with empty eyes. I went to him, knelt beside him. "Buddy, are you okay?" He didn't answer, didn't look at me, just kept staring. "Caleb, talk to me, please." Finally, he turned, looked at me with eyes that had seen something no child should ever see. "She fell," he said. His voice was flat, mechanical. "She fell down the stairs." He was lying. I knew it then, in my gut, with absolute certainty. My 9-year-old son was lying to me about how his sister died. But when I pressed him, he just repeated the same phrase. She fell down the stairs. Over and over, like a recording. The medical examiner ruled it accidental death. Multiple injuries consistent with a fall, broken neck, fractured skull, internal bleeding. Tragic, but not suspicious. I requested an investigation. The police looked into it, found nothing. Kendra was a respected dental hygienist with no criminal history. Ray Dunlap had a clean record. Caleb, when interviewed, told the same story he had told me. She fell down the stairs. Case closed. I buried my daughter on December 20th, 2023, and for 10 months I lived with the certainty that something was wrong, and the inability to prove it, until that Saturday night in October. The investigation moved fast once they knew what they were looking for. Sophie's body was exhumed on November 3rd, 2024. A forensic pathologist named Dr. Helena Cruz examined her remains with new eyes. Eyes that knew to look for signs of prolonged abuse, not just injuries from a fall. What she found was devastating. Healed fractures in Sophie's arms and ribs, multiple at various stages of healing. Injuries that had occurred over months, not in a single accident. Scarring consistent with restraints on her wrists and ankles, the same pattern as the handcuffs in the basement. Malnutrition. My daughter had been slowly starving while she lived in a house with a full refrigerator. And the injuries that killed her? Not consistent with a fall downstairs. Consistent with a beating. a severe, prolonged beating that had caused fatal internal bleeding. My daughter had been tortured for 47 days, then beaten to death, and her killers had staged it to look like an accident. When Detective Hargrove told me the results, I didn't react. Couldn't react. The horror was too vast, too complete to process. "We've upgraded the charges," he said. First-degree murder for both of them, premeditated, aggravated by the age of the victim and the extended period of abuse. "They're going to prison? They're never getting out. I'll make sure of it." I believed him. Caleb told me everything over the following weeks. Not all at once, in fragments, pieces of horror that emerged slowly, like shards of glass working their way out of a wound. He told me about the first time Kendra put him in the basement. 3 months after I moved out. He had talked back to her, something small, something a 9-year-old does, and she had dragged him downstairs and handcuffed him to the pipe. She said it was discipline. She said this was how bad children learn to behave. He told me about Ray, who was worse. Ray, who hit harder, who stayed longer, who seemed to enjoy the fear in children's eyes. He would come down just to look at us, just to watch us cry. He told me about Sophie, how she was handcuffed to the second pipe for the first time in October 2023, how she cried every night asking for me, asking why Daddy didn't come to save her. I told her you didn't know. I told her you would come if you knew. She kept saying, "Daddy will find us. Daddy will find us." He told me about the night she died. December 13th, 2023. Sophie had wet herself. She was 6 years old, chained in a cold basement, terrified. Of course she had wet herself. Ray was furious. He beat her. Kept beating her, even when she stopped crying, even when she stopped moving. Mom told him to stop. But not because she cared, because she was worried about marks. She always worried about marks. They took Sophie upstairs, cleaned her up, put her in pajamas. Then they called 911 and said she had fallen down the stairs. I heard Mom practicing what she was going to say. I was in the kitchen. I heard her scream. By the time I got there, she wasn't breathing. My son had listened to his mother rehearse the lie that would cover up his sister's murder, and then he had been forced to repeat that lie to police, to doctors, to me. For 10 months, my 10-year-old boy had carried the weight of that secret, knowing that if he told anyone, he would end up like Sophie. The ceiling was the key. Detective Hargrove told me that during one of our meetings after the arrest. We almost missed it. The first officers on scene were focused on the chains, the cuffs, the evidence at ground level. If you hadn't told us about the writing, we might not have looked up. Sophie wrote it. Yes. Based on the positioning, she must have scratched it while standing on something, probably an overturned bucket we found in the corner. She used a nail she had worked loose from one of the beams. She wanted someone to know she was there. More than that, she left evidence. The scratches on that beam, they match the time frame. The tally marks show 47 days, which matches the gap between when you moved out and when she died. My daughter, 6 years old, had the presence of mind to leave a record of her captivity, to scratch her name into wood so that someday, someone would know the truth. She saved her brother's life, Detective Hargrove said. If you hadn't seen that writing, if you hadn't known to tell us about it, we might have treated this as a simple custody dispute. Your ex-wife might have claimed you were overreacting, fabricating evidence. But that writing on the ceiling? That's irrefutable. That's Sophie telling the world what happened to her. I broke down then, in the middle of a police station surrounded by officers and detectives and evidence technicians. I collapsed into a chair and wept. My daughter was gone. Nothing would bring her back. But even in death, she had protected her brother. Even in death, she had brought her killers to justice. The trial began in April 2025. I attended every day. Sat in the front row, where Kendra could see me, where she would have to look at the face of the man whose children she had tortured and killed. The prosecution was methodical, devastating. They presented the evidence from the basement, photographs of the chains, the cuffs, the writing on the ceiling. They brought in Dr. Cruz to explain Sophie's injuries, the months of abuse that preceded her death. They played Caleb's recorded testimony. I had asked them not to make him testify in person. He had been through enough. They agreed, letting him give his statement on video with a child psychologist present. Watching that video in the courtroom was the hardest thing I've ever done. My son describing in careful, halting words how his mother and her boyfriend had tortured him and his sister, how they had chained them in a basement for hours, sometimes days, how they had beaten them for the smallest infractions. A spilled drink, a forgotten chore, a moment of crying, how he had watched his sister die and been told he would be next if he ever spoke. When the video ended, several jurors were crying. Kendra was not. She sat at the defense table, composed, still trying to maintain the mask she had worn for so long. Her attorney argued that she had been under Ray's control, that she was a victim too, that she hadn't meant for Sophie to die. The jury didn't buy it. It took them 4 hours to convict. Kendra, guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and criminal conspiracy. Sentenced to life without parole. Ray, guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated assault. Sentenced to life with a minimum of 35 years. Neither of them will ever leave prison. It's not enough. Nothing will ever be enough. But it's something. 2 years have passed since that Saturday night. I'm 44 now. Still working as an HVAC technician. Still living in Tyler, though I moved to a new house, one without memories, without ghosts. My mother, Loretta, moved in with us after everything happened. 69 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only reason I made it through those first terrible months. She takes care of Caleb when I'm at work, makes sure he does his homework, fills the house with the warmth it needs. Caleb is 12 now. 7th grade. He's in therapy twice a week. A trauma specialist named Dr. Amelia Thornton, who has helped him more than I can express. He still has nightmares, still flinches at loud noises, still has days when the darkness is too heavy, when he can't get out of bed, when all he can do is cry. But he's getting better, slowly, painfully, but better. He joined the chess club at school, has a best friend named Jordan who comes over for video games. He laughed last week, really laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep inside, and I realized it was the first time I had heard that sound in over 2 years. My son is not broken. He's healing. We visit Sophie's grave every Sunday. I had her moved after the trial. Away from the cemetery where Kendra's family had buried her, to a small plot under an oak tree in a quiet memorial garden. The headstone reads, Sophie Marie Mercer, 2017 to 2023. Beloved daughter, cherished sister. Forever in our hearts sometimes. Caleb talks to her. Tells her about school, about his friends, about the things he's learning in chess club. I won my first tournament last week, Sophie. I wish you could have been there. You always liked watching me play. Sometimes he just sits quietly, holding my hand, lost in memories of a sister who should still be alive. I've thought a lot about Sophie over the past 2 years, about the 47 days she spent in that basement, about the courage it took to scratch her name into that ceiling, to leave evidence even when she must have known she was dying. She was 6 years old. 6 years old, and braver than most adults I've known. I failed her. I know that. I should have fought harder for custody. Should have noticed the signs. Should have been there to protect her. But I can honor her now. By raising her brother. By making sure her story is told. By never letting the world forget what was done to her. Sophie was here. She was here. And she mattered. And she is loved. Always. I want to tell you something before I go. There are monsters in this world. They don't look like monsters. They look like ex-wives and boyfriends, like neighbors and friends, like ordinary people living ordinary lives. They hide in plain sight behind masks of normality, and they hurt people, especially children, in ways that leave scars no one can see. Pay attention. If a child seems withdrawn, frightened, reluctant to go home, ask questions. If something seems wrong, even if you can't explain why, investigate. If your gut tells you a child is in danger, act. I almost lost both my children because I didn't trust my instincts, because I assumed the system would protect them, because I didn't want to believe that their mother was capable of such cruelty. Don't make my mistake. Children are small. They can't protect themselves. They depend on adults to notice when something is wrong, to speak up, to intervene. Be the adult who notices. Be the adult who acts. You could save a life. Last week, Caleb asked me about Sophie. We were driving home from his therapy session, stopped at a red light when he said, "Dad, do you think Sophie knows she saved me?" I didn't understand at first. "What do you mean, buddy?" "The writing. On the ceiling. She scratched her name up there so someone would see it. So someone would know what happened." He paused. "If she hadn't done that, maybe no one would have believed us. Maybe Mom would have gotten away with it." I thought about that. About my daughter, 6 years old, standing on an overturned bucket in a dark basement, carving her name into wood with a rusty nail. "Yeah, buddy, I think she knows." "You really think so?" "I do, and I think she's proud of you for being brave, for surviving, for telling the truth." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I miss her, Dad." "I know. I miss her too. But I'm glad I'm still here. Is that wrong? To be glad I survived when she didn't?" "No, Caleb, that's not wrong. That's called being human. Sophie would want you to live. She would want you to be happy. That's why she wrote her name on that ceiling so that you would get out, even if she couldn't." The light turned green. I drove forward. "Dad? Yeah? Can we go see her? Sophie, after dinner?" "Of course, buddy. We can go whenever you want." He nodded, settled back in his seat. "Thanks, Dad." "For what?" "For coming that night, for finding me, for not giving up." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "I'll never give up on you, Caleb. Never. You're my son. You're all I have left. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you're safe and happy and loved." He smiled. Small, fragile, but real. "I know, Dad. I know." The house on Maple Lane is empty now. I drove by it last month on my way to a job site. Couldn't help it. Some part of me needed to see it again. The windows are boarded up. The lawn is overgrown. A "for sale" sign leans crookedly in the yard, weathered and faded. No one wants to buy the house where children were tortured and a little girl was murdered. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, staring at it, remembering the life I thought I had there. The birthdays and Christmases and lazy Sunday mornings. Caleb learning to walk. Sophie blowing out candles on her first birthday cake. All of it contaminated now. Poisoned by what came later. But also, I remember the night I kicked down the basement door. The moment I found my son. The evidence on the ceiling that brought my daughter's killers to justice. Sophie was here. She wrote it herself in letters scratched into wood. And because of those 3 words, her brother is alive, her killers are in prison, and the truth is known. I started the truck, drove away. I don't need to go back again. The past is another country. But Sophie's memory lives on. In her brother's healing, in the justice she achieved, in the father who will never forget her. Forever in our hearts. Always. If you're watching this, I want you to know one thing. Children remember. They remember the people who protected them, the people who listened, the people who showed up when it mattered most, and they remember the people who didn't. I will live with my failures for the rest of my life. The months I didn't fight harder for custody, the signs I didn't see, the daughter I couldn't save. But I will also carry this. The knowledge that when my son whispered from a dark basement, I heard him. When he needed me to act, I acted. When everything depended on one moment, one choice, one kicked-in door, I didn't hesitate. I couldn't save Sophie, but I saved Caleb. And every day that he heals, every smile, every laugh, every moment of normalcy we rebuild together, that's Sophie's legacy too. She was here. She mattered. She is loved, and she will never, ever be forgotten. Caleb is in the backyard right now. I can see him through the kitchen window. 12 years old, shooting hoops at the basketball goal my mother convinced me to install last summer. He's getting good. Made the junior high team last month. Practices every day after homework. He's building a life, a real life. A life that doesn't include basements and chains and fear. My son, alive, healing, free. And somewhere, I have to believe this, Sophie is watching, proud of her brother, at peace with what she did, knowing that her name on that ceiling made all the difference. Sophie was here, and because she was, Caleb is still here too. That's the story. That's the truth. That's everything. Thank you for listening. Share this if you know someone who needs to hear it. A parent going through a custody battle. A teacher who sees a child withdrawing. Anyone who suspects something is wrong, but doesn't know what to do. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. Act. You never know when you might save a life. I almost didn't go that Saturday night, almost waited until Sunday like she demanded. Almost lost my son the way I lost my daughter. But I went, and everything changed. One decision, one night, one kicked-in door. That's all it takes. That's all it takes to be the person who makes a difference. Be that person. Please, be that person.